Are Canadian oil and gas stocks doomed? Well, I don't think so, and neither do the experts. Today I've got Eric Nuttall, Rick Rule, and RBC Capital Markets, all of whom have shared their expert opinions on everything that's played out since Saturday. We're going to talk about what's happened, where the market traded on Monday, where we see things going over the next week, month, and year, and why I think there are really important decisions to be made for all of our portfolios right now. Now, obviously, we have seen oil and gas stocks down significantly over the last day. We saw fall-offs in stocks like C&Q, stocks like Cenovus, even stocks like Tourmaline and ARC, who aren't necessarily connected. And all of this relates to the idea that Venezuelan heavy crude will replace Canadian. And at face value, this idea is not crazy. These two heavy crudes do compete in similar markets. They are similar levels of quality, not quite the same, but similar. They serve similar purposes, things like asphalt. They are processed in similar refineries. A lot of things make sense to be compared. And so at a surface level, a lot of people immediately had the knee-jerk reaction of Venezuelan oil coming onto the market being incredibly negative for Canada. But that's where the important surface level distinctions became misleading, because I think this is where the market started to run and generalist investors started to make big moves. There's a couple of key things that you need to understand about the difference between Canadian and Venezuelan crude. And I think some of the best people to speak on this include one of our favorite analysts, experts that we talk about on the channel, Rick Rule. Now, Rick Rule gave honestly a really good segment today on BNN Bloomberg. I recommend you check it out. They don't have a written article here for me to show, so I just have a clip, but really important statements he made here. It is too early to tell. There is still a lot of political instability, and investment dollars hate instability. Beyond that, he also thinks there needs to be significant investments and that we have to wait and see if Venezuelan oil is going to ramp significantly long term. Now, he doesn't deny the fact that it's absolutely possible if the United States decides it has to happen. But like every expert, he says it'll take time, it'll take money. And who exactly is lining up to spend the money right now? We don't know yet. We saw an article this morning saying that both Exxon and ConocoPhillips, both of the big companies who are maybe expected to join Chevron in Venezuela, were not briefed on this action before it was taken. They were not told they were expected to invest in the Venezuelan basin. They've made their capital allocations for the year. So how does that change? We have to wait and see. I think this is the first important thing as an investor I want you and I will be watching. I think it's really important. If they decide, yeah, go time, invest right now, lots of money, and those hit the headlines, maybe it's time to rethink some positions. But if not, then the reaction this morning might be crazy. Then selling off something like C&Q up to 8%, 8+% as of the trough, the bottom point of the trading today, makes no sense. Now, one guy who is going to be bullish on Canadian oil just about no matter what is, of course, Eric Nuttall. And he had some strong words. In this article that I recommend you check out from BNN Bloomberg, he says a couple of important things. First, he says massive overreaction. This is the same sort of statement he was making on the weekend if you looked at his Twitter. He was basically saying, everybody stop panicking, which, to be fair, pretty reasonable thing to say when everyone's freaking out over the weekend about whether or not futures will be way down. And Grant Cardone is out there claiming that oil will be below $50 by Monday open. But he also points out a couple interesting things in this article that he talked about on BNN. Again, go check it out if you have the time. He talks about the fact that not only do a lot of people have a lot of opinions who do not care about oil most of the time, but also he points out that it is really, really difficult to surge production. And that there have been, if not years, decades of chronic underinvestment in the infrastructure required to extract this oil, to process this oil, and to ship it internationally. Now, does that mean that can't happen? No, but it will definitely take time. He makes some really interesting predictions here. He talks about the fact that not only does he believe we are at the peak of non-OPEC production and that OPEC itself probably only has about 1.4 million barrels of excess capacity, meaning that we're at just about the end of an excess capacity cycle, hence the fact that we're looking at the bottom of a sort of bearish move in the oil price with a long-term bullish cycle expected to start. But he also points out the fact that as Venezuela brings that oil online, it's likely not to replace Canadian oil, but instead be additional barrels that replace missing demand. He talks about the fact that he expects it to take years. He forecasts that adding, 500,000 barrels a day is going to take 2 years, $10 billion to $20 billion in investment. He thinks getting to 3 or 4 million barrels, which is the level that they were at pre-Chavez, he thinks that could take a decade and as much as $100 billion US to do that. Again, not impossible. Maybe it could happen faster, but still, he argues that there is a long-term bullish argument to be made because that extra oil is not necessarily going to replace Canadian heavy crudes. Instead, it will replace demand that is growing in places like South Africa, in places like West Africa, Southeast Asia, all these regions that are growing quickly and are growing energy demand quickly. He also makes the important point that the sudden renewed attention into this challenge for Canada could be a bullish catalyst towards a new pipeline. Now, we've seen a lot of the political risk in Canada start to move back, but as guys like Rick Rule have said, it has not moved enough. And so potentially there could be additional political movement among the general population on this topic based on these headlines, on the fear here. And maybe that political energy could translate into actual action in the shorter term, in the next couple of years, instead of waiting 3 or 4 years for another election, which could have some serious bullish tailwinds for the whole industry. Now, finally, one of the most interesting things I saw this weekend came from RBC Capital Markets, who put out a report Sunday night and maybe afternoon. It was really, really interesting. It talks about a lot of really interesting things. They make a lot of the same claims. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. There's a lot of political instability, which makes putting the money and time in a challenge. We don't necessarily know what the plan is from the United States. And so it's really hard to make an investment decision on behalf of an Exxon or a Chevron or a ConocoPhillips or whoever in this timeframe. You will have to wait and see whether those investment decisions can be made. What does the political shift in Venezuela look like? Who knows? But he also points out some really interesting things about WCS spreads, because the real thing we're talking about if we're bearish Venezuelan crude is not, oh my God, it's going to flood the market. It's simply that it will make Western Canadian Select heavy crude less attractive. And if you are worried about that, then this graph on the bottom of the screen is the most important thing to look at, because this shows you just how exposed all of the various heavy oil producers here in Canada that RBC covers, how they're exposed to the question. And so you see groups like Athabasca and Strathcona, very exposed, pure play Canadian heavy oil producers. You then see CJ all the way through SU, right? All the way through Suncor. And you see it slowly down and down and down. And I want you to look at the end of that list on the right-hand side. Now, Suncor, they are saying 0% sensitive to changes in WCS, WTI spreads. And right beside them, you see Canadian Natural Resources, one of our favorite stocks and one of the stocks that has been pummeled the most. One of the stocks that hit headlines as a stock that was falling. I mean, look at the chart here. This is the 5-day chart. It looks bleak for Canadian Natural Resources. It looks bleak. And really, does it make sense based on the chart we just looked at for C&Q's chart to look like this? That is the fundamental question we all have to ask ourselves today. Does it make sense for these stocks to be down this much? Does it make sense for light oil, natural gas producers to be down as well? Does it make sense for the Tourmalines and the ARCs to be dropping? Does it make sense for Birchcliff or Peyto? Does that really make sense to you? Or are there a lot of very nervous investors out there who are listening to random folks on the internet fearmonger? That's an important question. And while I'm not going to say that I am as bullish today about the long-term value, the long-term explosive upside we could see in these stocks as I was a week ago, that's not true, because the simple truth is today we have seen a risk premium introduced. There is now an increased risk that there could be significant structural competition in the long to ultra long term against Canadian heavy crude. That simply did not exist 2-3 days ago. And while that definitely introduces challenges for us as investors, it only introduces challenges if you believe that that's going to happen, if evidence suggests over the next weeks, months, and years that that is happening. Should that completely change your strategy? Maybe, maybe not. If you're a risk adverse investor, maybe it's time to shift from a CNQ, from a stock like this, to a Suncor. Maybe that makes sense for you if you really do want to minimize risk. If you're worried about heavy oil, maybe it's time to look at light. You can get a lot of value in light oil, natural gas focused producers right now. These guys have a lot of structural growth coming in the whole natural gas market for electrification, in this AI data center boom. They're even seeing significant expansions in LNG demand. So there's huge opportunities in the natural gas stocks as well. Maybe that makes sense to move and to shift your portfolio. But I don't think it's the end of Canadian oil. I don't think doom and gloom and dramatic overreactions to news on a Monday morning is the smartest decision most investors can make. So if you are right now looking at your portfolio and thinking to yourself, I don't know if I should hold, maybe I should sell, the news looks really scary and I'm not sure what to do, it's time to take a really important and self-reflective look at what your goals are, if these stocks fit your goals, and whether or not you want to hold. I'll say for myself, I am still holding on to my positions. If you look at my position sizing right now, if you look at my portfolio, I'm only maybe 35 to 40% exposed of my Canadian dividend portfolio to Canadian energy. And of that, only about 60% is really exposed to heavy oil. The rest is stuff like Enbridge, which of course is exposed to the story in a secondary nature, and things like Tourmaline and ARC, which of course are a little bit protected from that. And I'm willing to take that risk that maybe there will be serious long-term competition to these stocks in a way that I didn't see coming a week ago. And with all that being said, I think it's really important that we all remember what exactly we're investing for, what the goals are, and don't overreact to scary headlines. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What are your opinions on what's going on? Are you buying? Are you selling? Do you see opportunity here? Are you worried? Are you nervous for your stock? Or are you just trying to take advantage of a dip? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, you like what we do here on the channel, please give the video a like. If you like covering these Canadian topics, please do subscribe. And I hope I see you in the next one.